What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about why I am getting Killer Klowns from Outer Space. Honestly, it's not like I don't forget the game exists. I actually see it quite often, and whether it's because I like or respond to some of the tweets, right? Like, it's always kind of in my feed, but it's more actually like I can't believe how fast the year is moving, and I can't believe how fast we are fastly approaching June. This game comes out in just a few weeks. Like, I believe June 4th is the release date. I don't know for sure if that's with the early access or that is the early access. But regardless, some people are going to be playing this game on June 4th, which is not, actually, the time I'm recording this, 2 weeks away. From the time you guys are seeing this, less than 2 weeks away. That's pretty cool. I mean, this game has always stood out to me. Now, I got to be real. Like, I'm not a big fan of, like, the movie. I understand, like, the cult classic status. I'm not saying the movie is bad. I'm just not all that interested. My big story with Killer Klowns is my very first job I ever had at 16 years old. My manager, and she was maybe, like, in her 30s, she would always talk about Killer Klowns and talk about it as this like cult kind of like nobody knew what it was and nobody even watched it in the first place. I don't know if that second part was true, right? Because it definitely seems to have its fandom, but that's my big story with Killer Klowns. My manager, when I was 16, would talk to me about it. I don't talk to her anymore, but you know what? I think she'd actually be pretty excited that a game is actually being made on it. So, okay, well, where do I come in? Well, I just think this game looks pretty fun, and it's not actually all that more deep than that. This is the next entry in the asymmetrical, horror kind of thing. Now, look, to be honest with you, I am getting a little burnt out of these, and I think each one at this point in my career, my gaming age, they really need to bring something new to the table for me to be interested. And granted, I do think Killer Klowns has some things that stand out. And now here's the thing, beyond the property, because each one should have something with the property, right? When you look at Texas Chainsaw, when you look at, you can go back in the day with Dead by Daylight or even Predator Hunting Grounds or Friday the 13th, right? We've had so many of them. It needs to have the IP, and it needs to be strong, and it needs to kind of have that heart, and that is very important, right? Because first and foremost, you are making this, I would say, for the Killer Clown fandom. But to be honest with you, if you want the game to last long term, if you want people to enjoy it, it's got to be a good game. It's just got to land. Now, how do you do that? You do have to do some stuff to set you apart from the competition. And now, again, that could be mixing the IP with some new kind of original ideas in this asymmetrical, genre. And I do think that is what Killer Klowns is doing. Now, what this game actually reminds me a lot of is Friday the 13th. I don't know if that'll come through, entirely when I actually play the game, but watching some of the gameplay and the things that kind of stand out to me is the dynamics of how they fight each other, right? So, I mean, even if you look at how you escape and, the various ways actually of escaping, right? But the ability for the clowns to take out the humans and for the humans to even gang up and take on the clowns. Or then they basically have like their Dead by Daylight hook system, right? With like the cocoon nest and your transport, and you have to free them before they die. It's got a good, I think, mix of a Dead by Daylight-like formula, but then also a little Friday the 13th of, okay, here's your exit system, which, Dead by Daylight, I guess, did in terms of the gates, but then Friday the 13th, I think actually kind of expanded it a little bit more, right? Where it's like, well, hey, you can run out the clock. You can call the cops. You can do it this way. You could drive out there, right? You can do it a couple different ways. It's got to me that feel. And it's also got to me the feel of the collaboration where it's like if you want to take out one of these clowns, just like you want to take out Jason, you can do it. It's going to take more than one of you. It's going to take actual communication, but you can actually do it. And that to me is what kind of makes it special. Kind of having the Killer Klowns IP background, you have the familiarity with how all of these individuals, let's say, right, look from the locations or the weaponry. Like the weaponry looks really cool. That's something I would say probably makes this game stand out quite a bit. Like, what other game are you going to be using the weapons generally? I mean, some weapons I think are a little bit more generic, right? But some of the main weapons, when are you ever going to use those, in a different game, right? The 3v7 thing. Honestly, I feel like all of these games that come out, they have to throw a weird number at you just to kind of get you off your game, again, to be just a little bit different. I found it at first the most weird with Texas Chainsaw when it was 3v4, and I was thinking, how in God's name are 4 supposed to go up against 3? It's hard enough for 4 to go up against 1. Then Killer Klowns gets announced, and they say, no, it's 7 versus 3, and it's like, are you serious? So, I mean, Killer Klowns is actually a pretty big lobby, one of the bigger, in fact, I mean, if you think about it, Friday the 13th might have had 8v1. I feel like that's the highest to win. You can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So Killer Klowns might be, because Predator I think was 4v1. Yeah, Killer Klowns might actually be the biggest one of the entire group. So, does that make it stand out? It makes it different, and it makes it, okay, well, how is all of this going to work when you actually get into a match? And then just, again, from a personal side, what I've seen so far, I like it. Like, it looks fun. And, I've talked about this with Texas Chainsaw. I've talked about this with a lot of these games. I've said it with Rocket League in the past, too. That's not a horror game, though. I like to have a couple of these in rotation. I'm trying not to overthink it. Like, for this video, we're trying to analyze a couple different things of what makes it stand out. But generally, what's going to make this game last is going to be the fun factor, playing it with friends. The IP can carry it to a certain extent, and updates to it can carry it to a certain extent, but it's just got to be a fun game that you can play with others, and from my angle, there's not too many games. I can't even use the excuse where it's like, oh, well, there's 50 games coming out every month, but eventually it'll get busy. And what I always say, with all of these games, it just needs to be good enough where it feels like this is a game I can put in my rotation and say, hey, do I have a 3-day stretch where I'm not playing anything new? Because, I'm a big story guy, and sometimes, RPGs, JRPGs, open world games, linear stuff, whatever. Okay, well, do I have 3 days where I can just kind of sit back and do nothing? And it's like, okay, well, what do you do in those moments? Well, I generally go to Rocket League. I've actually gone back to Texas Chainsaw a few times, right? Okay, can Killer Klowns fill a void there? Can it be a game that when there's not really much else out there, and this is weeks or months after the game comes out. Hopefully when the game comes out, it's worth trying daily, immediately without any other games even being a problem. But, a month down the line, 3 months down the line, you can't expect people to, they might, but you can't expect people to be playing this game every single day. So as long as it's got that fun factor and it has, like all of these games kind of need to, it needs a hook. Dead by Daylight has a hook. Literally it has a hook, but also in terms of like what I'm talking about here, Friday the 13th. Texas Chainsaw, honestly, I believe has it too. It's a little bit more strategic, Texas, than a lot of the other games. It has to have, the fun factor and the hook are almost like the same thing to me, right? Where you're going to be generally doing the same thing each time, but there's kind of mini strategies in there, and maybe if you play with different people, you're going to act slightly different, right? That needs to be fun on repeat. If it's not fun, if it's fun for the first day and then it dies, which honestly I think like a Predator Hunting Ground or even like a Ghostbusters, those kind of fill that, where it's like Predator is fun to, for me, it was fun to an extent, but doing it over and over and over just didn't have that replayability factor. I think Texas had it. I think Friday the 13th had it to an extent. I think Dead by Daylight probably has it more than any of them, hence why it's still around, right? So Killer Klowns just kind of has to find its own place. But I'm excited to give it a try. I'll be playing it. We'll be covering it the best I can on the channel. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on. I hope to see you all on the next one.